Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you another episode in the emotional love story of Lythica and Hùng, two people who have endured countless storms and challenges together. In the previous episode, Hùng had to leave his family to take on an assignment in a remote mountain region. The distance, loneliness, and temptations of a foreign place are slowly testing his love and loyalty. Meanwhile, back home, Lythica waits every day with faith and hope, believing that the man she loves will keep the promise he once made. Will Hùng be strong enough to resist temptation? Will his faithfulness help him preserve the love he shares with Lythica, the woman who continues to wait for him in silence? Let's follow today's video to find out what happens next. And don't forget to leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the upcoming episodes. Early morning. A thick blanket of fog covered the mountains, so dense that one could hardly see a hand stretched out ahead. The air was bitterly cold, dew clung to every blade of grass, every leaf soaked through. From afar, the crowing of a rooster echoed faintly, mingling with the gentle murmur of a stream running through the rocks, the familiar sounds of the highlands, rustic, tranquil, and quietly lonely. Now and then, a dog barked from some distant village, before the silence returned once more. Inside a small room with an old corrugated iron roof, part of the teacher's dormitory, Hùng startled awake. He had spent nearly the whole night tossing and turning, barely closing his eyes before dawn broke. His face was pale and weary, dark circles shadowed his eyes from lack of sleep. Dim light filtered through the dusty window frame, casting his long shadow across the wooden floor, a solitary, lonesome figure swallowed by silence. He sat up, hastily throwing on a wrinkled white shirt. The room was sparse, just a narrow bed, a small desk, a few notebooks, and a worn-out backpack. Everything was still, only the faint sound of wind whistling through the cracks in the wall and the drip of water from the roof broke the quiet. In that silence, his heart whispered questions he could not answer. Standing before the mirror, Hùng gazed at his own reflection, gaunt, resilient, but with eyes clouded by a loneliness he could no longer conceal. He bowed his head and murmured, "Am I doing something that hurts Lythica? Did I really choose the right path?" His own voice echoed softly in the empty room, sounding more like a confession than a question. The pale morning light slowly crept through the window, illuminating a small wooden table in the corner. On it sat a photo of Lythica and Tony, the one he always kept close. The frame was worn, its glass dulled by dust and mist, yet the smiles of the mother and child still glowed, warm and bright, like sunshine from home. Hùng picked it up gently, running his fingers over Lythica's face in the photo, her tender smile, her kind eyes, and their little boy holding tightly onto her hand. A lump rose in his throat. He missed Tony's laughter as the boy ran to greet him after work. He missed Lythica's soft voice reminding him to take care of himself. He missed those humble dinners by the oil lamp, full of warmth despite their simplicity. Now, in this remote mountain village, those memories felt so vivid it almost hurt to remember them. He placed the photo back down and let out a long breath. It dissolved into the cold mist, fading, just like the ache in his chest that never truly went away. Outside, voices began to stir, his colleagues preparing for the literacy class that morning. Footsteps and soft laughter drifted through the wooden door, pulling him back to reality. Straightening his collar, Hùng pinned on his name badge and reached for the door. The morning breeze swept in, carrying the chill and the earthy scent of wet soil. He turned once more toward the photo, his eyes filled with quiet longing, as if leaving behind a silent promise. "I'm still keeping my word, Lythica." The door closed. His figure disappeared into the thick white fog, blending with the winding dirt path leading up the mountainside to the small, isolated school. Inside the room, the photo remained, still and silent, like a fragile thread that kept him bound to the love waiting for him back home, through the lonely days deep in the forest. From that day on, Mai seemed to become a completely different person. She no longer smiled as often, no longer sought out conversations with Hung, and no longer showed any hint of affection like before. Yet, it was precisely that change that made Hung feel something had shifted. She was still there, still gentle, still devoted, but the distance between them had turned into a quiet tenderness, subtle and hard to define. She remained diligent in her work at the small mountain school, teaching the village children in a wind-swept, misty classroom. Her smile was still kind whenever the students greeted her. But whenever Hung needed help, Mai somehow appeared, always at the right moment, as if she had known beforehand. At night, when the teacher's dormitory had gone dark and only Hung's room was still lit, she would quietly knock and bring a cup of hot coffee, steam rising in thin curls. She would place it next to his stack of papers and softly say, "You've been working late again. Drink this to keep warm." Then leave, without waiting for a reply. Sometimes, when sudden rain rolled in and mountain winds howled, Hung would return to his room to find a neatly folded raincoat hanging by the door. No note, no one waiting, only the damp footprints on the ground hinted that someone had just left. He knew it was Mai. And every time, a wave of gratitude, mixed with guilt, washed over him. Occasionally, when he coughed from the cold or looked exhausted after a long day of teaching, she would say nothing. Instead, a small packet of cold medicine would appear on his desk, along with a slip of paper bearing a few hurried words. "Take this, it'll help." The handwriting was delicate and slightly slanted, familiar in a way that made his heart ache. Hung would hold the note and feel his chest tighten. He knew she still cared, even if she tried to hide it. And somehow, that quiet concern was harder to reject than any open confession. Everything Mai did was gentle, natural, never excessive, never forced, yet enough to stir something in him. He didn't want to accept her gestures, but each time she reached out, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. Perhaps because, in those long, lonely nights in the mountains, her kindness felt like a small lantern, faint, but warm enough to chase away the cold. Meanwhile, back home, Lythieuca remained busy every day with Mother Ha and little Tony. In the mornings, she woke early to cook, tidy the house, and take her son to school. In the afternoons, she and Tony worked in the garden, listening to her mother's stories and laughing together to ease the longing in their hearts. But when night fell, the little house grew quiet again. The faint glow of a table lamp cast soft light on Lythieuca's face as she sat by herself, sometimes glancing at her phone, and sighing softly. The calls between her and Hung grew fewer with each passing week. Not because the love had faded, but because distance, and the rhythm of life, had slowly stretched the space between them. Messages still came and went, but they grew shorter, simpler. "Have you eaten? Is it cold there? Remember to dress warm." Few words, yet filled with affection and faith. But often, the replies were brief, "I'm fine," or "I'm busy." Many times, Hung held his phone, wanting to type something longer, to tell her he still loved her, that he missed home, missed his wife and son. But just then, a soft voice would call from outside, clear and familiar. "On Hungoi, I have something to ask." He froze. It was Mai's voice, gentle, bright, dissolving into the mist. He looked at the glowing phone screen, his fingers paused mid-sentence, then slowly set it down. "Maybe I'll text her later," he told himself. But when he turned back to his work, the phone stayed silent in the corner, the message never sent. Outside, Mai's silhouette faded into the fog. And inside Hung's heart, a small, quiet wave began to rise, soft, but unsettling. That same night, miles away, Lythieuca sat by the window, watching her phone light up, then dim again. She waited for a message, a call, anything, even just to hear him say, "I miss you." But the screen stayed dark. Outside, the wind brushed through the areca palms, carrying the chill of the night. She smiled faintly, a soft, sorrowful smile. "He's probably busy again," she whispered. No one knew that between two hearts longing for each other, distance was no longer measured in kilometers, but in the silence that grew between them. Late in the afternoon, gray clouds gathered thickly over the mountain peaks. The mist turned cold, blending with fine droplets of rain that began to fall. The highlands sank into a dull, silvery gloom, the sound of rain drumming on tin roofs, the whistle of wind through the trees filling the air with a vast, lonely stillness. The forest leaves trembled, rustling like the secret whispers of the mountains. The dirt path leading to the teacher's dormitory grew slick and muddy, rainwater streaming down its ruts, carrying away fallen leaves and soil. Hung returned later than usual. All afternoon, he and a few students had climbed to an upper village to fix the school's roof, which had leaked after last night's storm. The wind was fierce, the rain cold, and the work dragged on until dusk. By the time they finished, darkness was falling, and the rain came pouring down again. He pulled his thin jacket tighter, trudging along the muddy trail, each step heavy. His canvas shoes were soaked, caked with mud up to his knees. His hair clung wet to his forehead, and the chill seeped deep into his skin, making him shiver. All he wanted was to get back, light a small fire, dry his clothes, and drink something warm. But as he stepped onto the porch, he froze. Through the curtain of rain, a figure stood under the eaves, small but steady. It was Mai. She wore a beige wool coat, holding an old umbrella with frayed edges, rain dripping from its rim onto the ground. Her hair was damp, strands sticking to her cheeks. The yellow porch light cast a soft glow on her face, making it look gentle, yet touched with sorrow. "I was afraid you'd get wet," she said quietly. "So I brought you an umbrella." Her voice was low and warm, but her eyes held something deep, something unspoken. Hung stood still, unsure what to say. He looked at her, then at the umbrella, the familiar one that always hung by her bed. She had clearly been waiting for him for a long time, through the cold rain. A strange flutter rose inside him, faint, but uncontrollable. He drew a slow breath, trying to steady his tone. "Thank you," he said softly. Just 3 simple words, yet in that silence, they seemed to echo with another meaning. Their eyes met. A brief moment, yet it stretched endlessly. Rain kept falling steadily on the roof, each drop sharp and clear. In Mai's eyes, something flickered, gentle, sincere, but beneath it lay a quiet yearning, a spark of challenge. And in Hung's, there was confusion, and the fear of a man trying to hold his ground against a feeling he knew he shouldn't have, yet couldn't quite deny. A fleeting thought flashed through Mai's mind, quick as lightning. If Hawaii weren't here, who would he belong to? She lowered her gaze, hiding that look, and held out the umbrella to him. Her voice softened, nearly blending with the sound of rain. "You should rest early, or you'll catch a cold." Then she turned away, walking slowly toward her room at the end of the corridor. Her slender figure faded into the rain, leaving only the faint scent of ginger tea in the damp air. Hung stood motionless beneath the porch, watching her disappear. A strange heaviness filled his chest. He wanted to believe it was just simple concern between colleagues. But the more he told himself that, the faster his heart seemed to beat. He stepped into his room, set the umbrella by the table, and stared blankly at the wall. "What am I doing?" he whispered. That night, the rain never stopped. Its rhythm merged with the wind, weaving a sorrowful melody that lingered through the darkness. In her small room, Mai sat silently by the window. The lamp cast her shadow long against the wall. On the table, a cup of ginger tea sat cold, the steam gone, only a faint aroma left. She rested her chin on her hand, gazing out toward the dim light from Hung's window, still burning across the courtyard. She murmured softly, voice barely above a breath. "I don't want to take anyone away. But I'll make him see who truly cares for him the most." Her eyes closed briefly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Her voice was quiet, but her gaze glowed with determination beneath the golden light, the glimmer of an intention taking shape. No longer the hesitant affection of a woman secretly in love with her colleague, but something firmer, deeper, like an underground current beneath calm earth. Silent, but strong enough to sweep everything away when the time comes. Outside, the rain kept falling, white and endless, washing away all traces of the day. The wind sighed through the trees, whispering of something approaching. A subtle, dangerous plan was beginning to weave itself. Born from the heart of a woman who seemed fragile. In the cold, lonely night of the misty mountains. Distance tests not only footsteps, but the human heart itself. Amid the endless mountains, where mist cloaks every path and the sound of a stream echoes through the midnight silence, Hung is facing the hardest trial of his life, not the exhausting lessons, nor the long days trudging through rain and forest alongside his students, but the struggle within his own heart, one that is slowly wavering in the quiet loneliness of the highlands. Months have passed since he left home for his assignment in the remote mountains. At first, it was merely longing, the nightly phone calls, the tender, simple messages from Lythieuca. But as the days blurred together in endless busyness, as the phone signal grew weaker, as the steady rain stretched on without end, Hung began to feel the emptiness inside him growing, quietly, relentlessly. In this fog-shrouded wilderness, there was only the sound of wind, of rain, and of Mai's soft voice. She appeared beside him at the moments he felt weakest, gentle, attentive, never intrusive, yet somehow always reaching the corners of his heart. Each cup of hot coffee, each goodnight wish, each caring glance, all became invisible threads that slowly wrapped around him, binding him before he even realized he was drifting off course. When solitude lasts too long, when silence becomes your only companion, the human heart can grow fragile in ways you don't expect. Hung still remembers Lythieuca, his devoted, tender wife, and their little boy, whose small voice calls, "Daddy," during brief evening calls. He still carries within him the image of their modest home, the soft glow of a yellow lamp, the warmth of a simple dinner shared by three. But distance and time have begun to blur even those precious memories. Will he remain steadfast enough to keep the promise he once made? Can he resist the temptation of care, of the gentle eyes that follow his every step in silence? Or will he be drawn into the quiet, dangerous pull of a fragile affection, one born from loneliness, as easy to fall into as rain, and as hard to escape as mist? And Mai, the woman who once seemed so delicate, harbors within her a strength fiercer than anyone realizes. Behind every gentle smile, every small act of concern, lies a quiet resolve that cannot be easily extinguished. She doesn't wish to fight or steal love away, but she refuses to stand in the shadows forever. She wants to prove that here, in this desolate place, she is the only one who truly understands Hung, who shares his hardships, his silence, the things Lythieuca, far away, cannot possibly feel. From that thought, a plan begins to take root in Mai's heart. A subtle, quiet plan of separation. Not through words, but through small gestures, quiet acts of kindness, enough to slowly draw Hung off the path he once vowed to walk. The question now is no longer, does Hung still love Lythieuca? But rather, how long can he hold on to that love before it begins to fade? And Lythieuca, the one left behind. Can she sense the strange winds now drifting toward her home? Will her faith be strong enough to hold on? Or will she simply wait in silence, as love slowly slips beyond her reach? The answer will come in the next episode. Stay tuned, as trust begins to waver, as old promises tremble in the storm. As hearts are tested by the harshest trials of love. A new tempest is quietly gathering, not just over the mountain skies, but within the hearts of Hùng and Lythica, where love, faith, and destiny now stand at a crossroads no one could foresee.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện về mẹ đơn thân Lytieuca và cảnh sát Hùng nha mọi người ơi. Hiện tại thì mình vẫn đang edit và chưa hoàn thành, thì mình vẫn đang trong quá trình hoàn thiện video. Video này thì bây giờ mình làm đang là 9 giờ tối, thì mình sẽ lên vào sáng ngày mai là lúc 7 giờ sáng. Mọi người hãy đón chờ video, theo dõi và ủng hộ cho mình mọi người nhé. Và nếu như mà đã xem hết video và xem đến đoạn mà mình chia sẻ cuối video như thế này thì mọi người hãy ấn đăng ký kênh, like, subscribe kênh, rồi bật chuông thông báo lên để đón chờ những video tiếp theo. Và nhớ là đừng có bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Hy vọng rằng là mọi người sẽ cảm thấy video hôm nay hay và sẽ tiếp tục xem những video sau của mình. Tạm biệt mọi người, hẹn gặp lại. Bye bye.